Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is Wednesday at 11 o'clock, 11:03. Hope everyone's doing good. It is a pretty nice day here in Mid Coast. A little chilly, normal stuff for this time of year. So I've been knee deep in getting back into the world of exploitation and grindhouse. Again, it's I try to bring a full picture of all kinds of films and movies and genres and styles and movies with small, very small, minuscule budgets, and in films that are massive in scope. I don't know. It's like I don't like to toot my own horn or pat myself on the back, but I don't know. I like variety. I think at the end of the day, when it comes to music, art, or film, it's either, to me, it's either good or bad, and it doesn't matter what style, what budget it is, or if it has commercial value or not. I just feel like, good art is good art. And, you know, uh, there was that, famous quote by the great jazz trumpet player, musician Dizzy Gillespie. Basically he was referring to more or less the same thing. He's like, it's either, whatever style of music it is or whatever genre something is labeled, it doesn't really matter. It's either it's good or bad. So the sky is the limit as far as if you have a an open mind and you're willing to check out things, that's really all that matters. But getting back to what I was saying, without patting myself on the back, I do feel it's a pretty cool thing, in all honesty, that I offer as far as a spectrum of different films, where I can do a show, say, on, something that is so incredibly low budget, for instance, a channel that where you can find the variety of, well, where I'll like cover the movies of Herschel Gordon Lewis, who's one of my favorite exploitation directors of all time. And then I'll do, sometimes within that same week, I'll do a review for, say, Killers of the Flower Moon by Martin Scorsese, which just came out, well, it came out last year now, which is this massive, epic Hollywood movie. So again, it doesn't matter. But that being said, I like that, you have, well, I think from the outside looking in, if I was a fan of movies, I would find that pretty interesting that somebody has, the full spectrum. So often I see where, there'll be, the focus will be, say, mainly on newer horror films or newer films, newer Hollywood films, or vice versa, where there'll be a channel or a movie reviewer will they'll just talk about only slasher or only exploitation movies, and I get that, like that can be something that could be detrimental to the channel because I'm a little bit all over the place. I don't have a marketed, targeted like group of people that I'm trying to seek out or to reach. And I know for with getting hits and traffic and people to subscribe and like your stuff, obviously on paper it makes more sense to kind of have it a little bit more narrow and have it focus on one or two particular things. That makes sense because that is that you reach a certain audience, and for all intents and purposes you kind of milk that. But I try to approach everything with this channel just from a real natural way. I don't really, I mean, I do care about that stuff. I do, of course, I want people to like my channel. Who doesn't want to have, a little bit of praise and acceptance? Who doesn't? But I don't really, for me, honestly, it's not at all a priority. I would be doing this whether I had 2 people or 2 million people watching or listening. I'm open to learning and to try to develop and make all of these videos and the overall presentation better and better. And I hope that it has grown. But that being said, everything that I'm talking about movie wise, everything is, purely from a sincere place. It's not about this or that demographic or that audience or, trying to work in the confines of a very particular thing. It's just me being honest about the movies I love. So, but that being said, my favorite genre, like I've said many times, is the exploitation world. So I've been really digging deep back into my collection of movies in that world, and it's been a super fun ride. Something so magical, about it, and so I'm gonna try to go up to Bull Moose probably pretty soon, get some more movies. I feel like a lot of those titles are starting to kind of go away slowly, so I'm trying to, like, as a collector and as a fan, I'm trying to acquire really as many as I can before it, you know, disappears. I don't really like to buy. You can buy things online, of course, but I don't really like that. I feel that's part of the magic is going into a shop and searching and finding things and that discovery. That's for me is where it's at really. But today's show is on a movie I've been wanting to actually talk about for a while. I only own it on VHS, which is kind of a crime. I need to buy it on Blu-ray. I did see it listed on Blu-ray. Um, I looked it up online actually a year or two ago, and it was very, very expensive. It was like, I think it was like $35, and it was a Blu-ray, anniversary edition, and that is the one and only Death Race 2000, which came out in 1975. It is one of the greatest exploitation movies ever. It's one of the greatest films that has the theme of the dystopian future, like a post-apocalyptic scenario. It was directed by one of my favorite directors of all time, and that is the one and only Paul Bartel. One of my favorite movies of all time that he directed is Private Parts. I did a show on that. I think I've done actually two shows on that movie. It's it is such a masterpiece. It's my two favorite. It's hard to say when you make your list, but I always have informal lists going. But there's always movies, always and the same thing happens with music or books or whatever. There's always my top tier artists that I kind of always revisit, or things I always check out again. You know, amongst like an ocean of different things that I'm kind of checking out or revisiting and all those kinds of things. But there's always those top tier things that I go back to, and Private Parts is definitely one of those movies. I think in the world of horror exploitation, especially horror-based exploitation movies, I definitely have a list of movies that I would say are my favorite, and I would definitely say Tourist Trap overall is my favorite exploitation horror movie of all time. That movie is just so amazing, starring Chuck Connors. I've done a couple shows on that, but then also right behind it, which would be a really close second, if not tied for first, would be Private Parts, which was directed by Paul Bartel. Amazing director. He died really young, prematurely, and he died of a heart attack. But so many incredible movies he directed. Private Parts, 72. Scenes of the Class in 89. Death Race 2000, which is going to be today's topic. Eating Raoul in 82 and Cannonball in 76. He worked for a long time with the legendary producer and also an amazing director in his own right, Roger Corman. Roger Corman was, well, he is still alive. I don't believe he is as active as he was. He's he's getting up there in age, but a legendary a legendary figure in the world of exploitation. To some degree, one of the most iconic, if not the most iconic, being that he was, he's been in so many positions behind the camera and then also in front of the camera. He was responsible for getting so many directors started. You know, Martin Scorsese, John Carpenter. The list. James Cameron, and he also worked with a lot of low budget independent directors. Paul Bartel, for instance, and so this movie was a collaboration with Paul Bartel and Roger Corman. Roger Corman produced this movie, and Death Race 2000 came out in 1975. Just an amazing film. It's basically centered on this futuristic dystopian scenario of where it's kind of a the movie has a lot of social commentary on class warfare, and it was a really, in a lot of ways, a prophetic movie about wars, oppression. It's really centered on social class and warfare, the weak and the strong, but it's basically centered on these series of races that happen where you have all of these teams, and they're basically like a futuristic form of the gladiators, and they kill each other off, and it's all about this living under this government that is a total like dictatorship. There is complete to a degree mental slavery, financial slavery imposed by the government. And it has this theme of trying to break away from the status quo. It's also a very, like, for me, this movie's always been such a punk rock movie. It's so gory, it's so violent, over the top, it's sleazy, it's really trashy, and again, it's so larger than life. The cast for Death Race 2000, and again, unfortunately, I only own it on VHS, which is a crime. And again, I did say I looked it up, and it was very expensive. I have not, which I'm really surprised. It's I think it's one of the most popular movies that Roger Corman was involved in. It was a huge hit overall. Like, it was a cult movie when it came out, but it's grown on to be this iconic film. And it was remade once or twice. It was one of the first movies to star that starred Sylvester Stallone. I believe it might have been his first movie, and he's amazing in it. And it's so funny seeing Sylvester Stallone in this movie, because obviously he went on to become a huge action star, with Rocky, and then all of the action movies that he made in the 80s and 90s. Which in comparison to what he did in Death Race 2000, he's pretty straight laced in most of the other films. He's kind of this straight and narrow, black and white character, and I love his action movies. But to see that he was in this movie that was just so kind of fucking nuts is just great. A lot of great actors started. Got their start, especially directors, got their start in the world of exploitation, to try to, carve their niche here, to try to make a little bit of a mark and establish a career, and that's happened for many actors and for many directors. I just did a big show on Bob Clark, Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. And he was, he's a primetime example of a director that, started out in the world of like the grimy exploitation, and then went on to make some, big Hollywood budget, movies in the future. So, and, just so great. And and it makes sense, that a lot of people, because that was the time in the world of exploitation where there were certain hits that were coming out of Hollywood or Europe. So you had this movement of these newer filmmakers that are coming up and seeing, well, let's try to capitalize. Or this movie, there's this movie called The Exorcist that came out and it was a huge hit. Let's try to capitalize on it and rip it off. And even on talking about children shouldn't play with the dead things, where they're Bob Clark, they were talking about, well, they had just seen Night of the Living Dead and that was a commercial hit at the time, so they're like, hey, let's exploit it and try to make our own version of that in this like totally weird way. And so getting back to Roger Corman, I mean, so many movies that he was responsible for producing, and he also was a magnificent director. And so many people came through his camp, and I would say Death Race 2000 is definitely one of his biggest films in the world of exploitation. It might even be the most popular movie that he did. I could be wrong, but Little Shop of Horrors was another film that he was involved in. But all the movies that he was involved in, and also as a director, being like one of probably my favorite film he ever directed was The Mask of the Red Death. You know, Definitely steeped in the gritty world of exploitation, but you had lots of great horror films, lots of weird action movies, these post-apocalyptic films like Death Race, so many different kinds of films, and even comedy, biker movies. I mean, the sky's the limit. And Paul Bartel, like again, this movie really I feel shows how just incredible of a director he was. Where this movie, because this movie is very, for all intents and purposes, is kind of epic in scale, and they had no budget, and to see that he was Paul Bartel and you know Roger Corman, what they were able to do to have this shoot this movie that was this complete post-apocalyptic epic film, but with like no money is astounding. When you see this film, it's so raw and dirty and just kind of nasty, but they just pulled it all off. You could tell there was so much passion behind this movie. And again, that goes back to why I love exploitation so much, because it's it's just full on passion and fire and piss and vinegar. It's you get that feeling, and it's also infectious, that energy, I feel. And obviously, talking about Death Race 2000, I cannot forget to talk about David Carradine. One of the most iconic actors in the world, and the list of films, was just amazing. He was in the TV show of Kung Fu. I mean, so many movies. It's crazy. Just a wild, everything from comedies to westerns, action movies. I mean, you name it. Kung Fu, of course, the series from 72, 75. Big Stan, 2007. Death Race 2000, 75. Lone Wolf McQuade, 83. Bird on a Wire, Cannonball. Boxcar Bertha, which was the first Martin Scorsese movie, which I've never seen. He was a legend. He was a legend in Hollywood. Huge David Carradine fan. Of course, the Kill Bill movies, amazing, which are movies that I will eventually cover. He carries this movie, and I love Sylvester Stallone in this movie. I do absolutely have to get this movie, Death Race 2000, on Blu-ray. I remember when I looked it up online, it was very expensive. I think it was like $30. It had it was an anniversary edition, and it had I believe it had a bonus disc with like hours of special features. But I'm really surprised that I have never come across it in my travels last few years going to Bull Moose, because I know it's a very popular movie, especially in the exploitation world, and I think it's one of those movies that you know everyone is kind of aware of that movie. Even folks who are not like into the exploitation world, it's just a very well known movie inside that world and also outside of that world. But you know, it's a must have. I will eventually get it. I think it's in demand, and obviously for that price. So we'll see. But I will continue to keep my eyes peeled for it. But it's an amazing film. It's Paul Bartel, just one of my favorite directors. So please check it out. Most people have probably seen Death Race 2000, but you can't say enough good things about this movie. It's a bona fide cult classic in every every conceivable way. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.